Move toward the height of land on Canada's first wet highways. Push on up the Mississagi or Groundhog Rivers. Discover a series of great lakes which form with few portages a continuous canoe route. That is the umbilicus for this large and sprawling country. Ride on, over the watershed and down the wild and beautiful canyons of the Spanish and Mississauga. Feel a kinship with those who went before you. Experience a solitude and quiet grandeur that has endured for centuries. Chance upon a small, isolated settlement, a banding together of men on the edge of wilderness. Sense the history of this tiny town, because it is a part of what we are. The town is called Biscotasing. Spawned in the twilight years of the 19th century by the steel and fire of the Canadian Pacific Railway, Biscotasing raucously greeted the dawn of the 20th century as a rambunctious, booming northern Ontario town. Today, Bisco is declining. Times have changed. We have changed. Diminutive local industry increasingly gives way to massive automated production centers. Ever-enlarging cities offer comfort and security, drawing or forcing many away from the land. And Bisco, and northern towns like her, are the inevitable result. But for a time, and what a time it was, the name Biscotasing shone bright and proud. The native people, the Ojibways and Cree, had for more than 10,000 years an intimate rapport with this land that is now called northeastern Ontario. They named its rivers, the Mississauga, Winnebago, Cockatish, and its lakes, Opipisawe, Majabong, Wakami, and Biscotasing. They traveled and trapped this great unspoiled wilderness in extended family units during the long, harsh winter months. Meeting with other bands on the banks of its lakes in the summer, when wood, berries, and fish were abundant. The great French and later English fur fleets passed below Algoma, never penetrating the interior. Throughout the 19th century, the native people traded furs for European goods at Hudson's Bay Company posts, at Matagami and Flying Post to the north, at Green Lake to the south. But on their home ground in the Algoma district, for 3.5 centuries after the coming of the white man, they lived in isolation, left free to follow their ages-old way of life. Until 1880, when the Canadian Pacific Railway's steel crawled across the land, crossing close by Biscotasing Lake because of its location on the height of land, standing astride the headwaters of the Spanish, Mississauga, Matagami, and Groundhog Rivers. To the Cree and Ojibwe, the fire-breathing monster signaled the beginning of the end to their traditional existence. To the squalling infant of Biscotasing, it gave the breath of life. Bisco became a construction boomtown. The village was off to a roaring start, in more ways than one. That first year, visiting police found and destroyed 500 gallons of bootleg whiskey. The 1890s saw Bisco settling into prosperity, and Bud O'Neill, then a small boy, was there to see it.
Biscotasing was the railhead, you might say, for goods that were going into the more remote outposts of the Hudson Bay Company. And goods were transported in transport birch bark canoes. While I was there, the Klondike gold rush began, and the trains went through there loaded with people. And the slogan was Klondike or bust.
Mr. O'Neill watched as thousands of prospectors headed for a faraway frontier, and probably gave little thought to the frontier of which he was a part.
There were no sidewalks, no roads, no lights, no electricity, of course. And there was one church, the Anglican church, of which the rector was John Sanders.
Logging came to the Bisco area too. Mr. O'Neill's parents moved up to Bisco from Fenelon Falls near Peterborough because
they had timber limits near Biscotasing, and the logs were driven down the river, and they were there converted into lumber, and it was clear pine.
By 1900, the Ottawa Valley was logged out, and the timber barons moved in force to the Bisco area. In 1905, Pat Shannon and J.R. Booth, who for a time owned the largest one-man-controlled company in the world, bought the Biscotasing sawmill and surrounding timber limits. The new owners recruited a workforce from Pembroke. Many of the mill hands arrived with their families, and Bisco grew another notch. Yet, despite the railway and the loggers, the vast area beyond the village remained Indian land. Aside from a few white trappers, a handful of rich tourists who made the Mississauga canoe trip from Thessalon, and the fire rangers who patrolled the bush in the summer months, white men were seldom seen in the hinterland. Maurice Kingsford was a summer fire ranger at the neighboring Mississauga Forest Reserve just before the First World War.
I do remember as we paddled back to the Forest Reserve, we passed groups of Indians on islands living there who never said anything. They just, when we passed, we waved. They hardly waved back. They just looked at us. And you'd think that they hadn't seen anybody for months and years.
Jim Espaniel, an Ojibwe, was one of the early fire rangers. Jim's roots to the land ran deep. He describes what the early years of fire protection were like.
As you pull out in the spring of the year, you might go in, there'd be 5, 6, maybe 8 canoes together would go in. And then they'd have their own beat to go to. One would go to Ranger Lake. One would go to Winnebago River and Kebisquashin and Wakamie.
Yahoo! Silver! It's silver! And silver it was, found near Gauganda, north of Bisco, just before World War I. Then gold at Shining Tree. Cobalt fever pulled hordes of prospectors to the area, and Bisco was their jumping-off place for sorties into the north. And always there were the trains. The Canadian West offered a chance of prosperity and permanence for hundreds of thousands of people.
Those were the days of the big immigration, which was enormous, and the emigrant trains were pouring through Bisco at the rate of 2 or 3 a day. They were shoving through trains as fast as the railway could put them through.
This was Bisco's golden age. The Booth and Shannon Mill was operating full out. The town bulged with 250 contented souls, doubling to 500 during the summer when the Crees and Ojibways came to trade their furs. And fur prices were phenomenal. Many of Bisco's men went to the trap lines. men like Jim Espaniel.
In winter months, we trapped. At that time, everybody blazed their own trapping ground. Pretty near all of Bisco, all the population of Bisco.
In 1913, a disastrous fire had leveled much of Bisco, including the mill. But the town was quickly rebuilt by citizens sure of Bisco's bright future, an unending string of golden tomorrows, further enhanced by the establishment of an Ontario Forestry Branch air base on an island near the village, shortly after the First World War. Bisco was a small, closely knit community built on hardiness and hard work. Bisco's people were like a big family, toiling together, playing together, living a life many of us in large impersonal cities may never know. During a visit with his cousin in Toronto, Jack Woodworth, son of the Hudson's Bay factor at Bisco, happily greeted everybody he met on the street. His shocked, city-wise cousin asked him what in the world he thought he was doing. Was he trying to get arrested? Jack calmly explained that he always said hello to everyone back in Bisco. That's the way it was in Bisco. Jack's sister Madeline has spent her life there.
It was a nice town. There's a lot of houses, you know, and a lot of people here then. Yes, there were hockey games. The boys used to play hockey. And used to go snowshoeing. A bunch of all get together and go snowshoeing. And we end up, Mrs. Frank Court, you see, well, you know, the girl who looked for Mrs. Cole, she used to be in the party too, you know. So Mrs. Cole, she used to, well, bring them all down and we'll bring them all down to the boarding house when they're coming in. We all used to go down there. And we'd play games, and we used to have a wonderful time down there. She always had a lovely lunch waiting for us.
But the town slowly changed. The construction of 2 more transcontinental railways to the north meant that northern Indians no longer brought their furs south. The federal government refused to grant a native request for a reserve at Bisco. So many moved, and disease claimed many others. In the late 1920s, Bisco's bright future was snuffed out. First, the Hudson's Bay store burned to the ground.
Hudson Bay said they wouldn't build here again because there were no Indians here. You know, they all went, and there's a lot of them died, and some of them went up around Woman River, and a lot of them, they're practically all dead up there now, the old Bisco Indians.
Then, timber limits worked to exhaustion, the owners took down their mill and left the area. And new high-capability aircraft made the Lands and Forest Air Base obsolete. It was closed in the early 1940s.
You know, the children grew up while they'd go away to work, you know. All my children left. All the other ones that were growing up, you know, the boys, they all had to go away to work because there's nothing here anymore, just the section and the forestry.
Nothing here except the section and the forestry. Today, the trains that gave birth to this town pass through but seldom stop. Bisco's population has dropped to 50. Its one-room school is now closed. The children have grown, gone to a different life. Dozens of small towns in northern Ontario suffer the same fate. Towns like Bisco live on memories of their past.
I was too lonesome here now, you know. After when you think about all the times you used to have when Bisco was, we used to have a good time here. A lot of people here. And they all start moving away and moving away and moving away.